The snow was falling slowly, like ash from the sky, cold and quiet. The wind howled through the broken towers, whispering through the bones of the dead city. Ray adjusted the straps on his backpack and walked carefully across the frozen ground. He wasn't here to save anyone. He was just a human tech scavenger, sent to collect power cores and bring them back to the ship. The old alien planet had long been abandoned, left behind after some secret war no one talked about. But then he saw her. She was lying in the snow, curled up near the rusted edge of a crashed escape pod. At first, he thought she was dead. Her skin was pale purple, cracked like dried paint. She had no shoes, just bloodied feet buried in the ice. Her hair was tangled and her arms covered in scars. She was shaking, barely breathing, her lips slightly moving. Ray stopped, heart beating. Hard in his chest, he wasn't sure what he was looking at. An alien woman, yes, but something was different. A broken metal collar was locked around her neck. Flashing a red light that was almost out, he stepped closer, slowly, carefully. Her eyes opened, glowing a soft blue under her frost-covered lashes. She looked at him like someone waking from a nightmare. Then, in a weak voice, she whispered, "Don't leave me." Ray knelt beside her, not sure what to do. He pulled off his coat and wrapped it around her body. Her skin was ice cold, her body as light as paper. "Can you hear me?" Ray asked, brushing snow from her face. She nodded weakly, her lips trembling. Then she said something strange, something soft but clear. "I'll give you a child," she whispered. "Just don't abandon me." Ray stared at her, confused and shaken. He wasn't sure if she was delirious or truly meant those words. Why would she say something like that to a stranger, to a human she just saw? But she was crying now, silent tears rolling down her face. She tried to reach for him, but couldn't lift her hand. He looked around. The sky was turning darker. A storm was coming fast, and if they stayed here, she would die. He had a shelter. About 2 clicks away, an old Cums bunker buried in snow. Ray made a quick decision. He picked her up in his arms, her weight barely more than a child's, and began walking. She clung to him with what little strength she had. Whispering again, "Don't leave me," Ray said nothing, just tightened his grip and kept moving. The wind screamed louder now, but he pushed forward step by step. Ice cracked under his boots and snow blew in his eyes. His hands were freezing, his muscles burning. But he didn't stop. Finally, he reached the bunker, pushed open the half-broken door, and brought her inside. The place was dark and cold, but at least it was dry. He laid her on a cot and started a small heat lamp from his portable core. As warmth spread through the room, she coughed and curled into herself. He gave her a hydration pack, and she drank slowly, like she hadn't tasted water in days. Ray sat beside her, watching, thinking, why was she out there, all alone? Why did she think offering a child was the only way to be saved? He didn't understand, but he felt something deep inside his chest. A strange mix of anger, sadness, and protectiveness. He looked at her again, now asleep under his coat. Her breathing was slow but stronger, her hands still shaking but warmer. That collar on her neck, it wasn't just a tag, it was a prison, a signal, a warning. Someone had left her there to die quietly where no one would care. Ray clenched his fists. He didn't know who she was or what her past held, but he knew. One thing clearly, she wasn't trash to be thrown away. She was alive, and she wanted to stay alive, even if all she had to offer was the promise of a child. She deserved more than that as the storm roared outside. Ray kept watch. He didn't sleep, just sat near her, feeding the heat lamp and listening to her soft breathing. She had begged him not to abandon her, and something inside him whispered that he wouldn't, not now, not ever. The wind outside howled like a wild beast, throwing snow against the metal walls of the bunker. Inside, it was warmer, but not by much. Ray sat beside the small alien woman, feeding the old heat lamp every hour. She hadn't spoken since she passed out in his arms. Her breathing was soft now, slow but steady. The coat he had wrapped around her was damp from melted ice. Still, she was alive. And that was something. He opened a ration pack, tore it in half, and warmed the softer piece by the lamp. Then he knelt and gently tapped her shoulder. She opened her eyes slowly, blinking like someone waking from a long, heavy sleep. "You need to eat," he said softly. She didn't answer, only stared at him like she wasn't sure if he was real when he placed the food near her mouth. She opened her lips, just a little, and took a bite. Ray sat back, watching her chew. She ate like someone who hadn't seen food in weeks. Quiet, scared, careful not to spill a single crumb. He didn't rush her, just waited as the cold wind screamed above them, "What's your name?" Ray asked when she finished. There was silence for a moment. Then she whispered Velia. Her voice was dry, almost too soft to hear. Ray nodded, repeating her name in his mind so he wouldn't forget it. "I'm Ray," he said. Velia looked at him with tired eyes, then slowly said, "Why did you help me?" Ray didn't know how to answer. He could have walked away, just like the others must have. But something about her, her voice, her fear. That collar around her neck had made it impossible to turn away. "You looked like you didn't want to die," Ray finally said. Velia didn't smile, but her eyes softened just a little. They sat in silence for a while, the heat lamp humming between them. Then Velia shifted under the coat and said, "I was meant to carry children." Ray turned to her, confused. "I was created for that," she said, voice calm now, almost empty. "But when they said I was broken, they left me." Ray's stomach twisted. "You mean they dumped you here?" Velia nodded slowly. "They test us, measure everything, and when we fail, they say we are no longer suitable." Ray leaned back against the wall, his hands clenched. So many questions were spinning in his head. Who were they? Why would anyone treat another being like that? Velia looked down at her hands, thin and trembling. "I didn't know what else to say when I saw you," she whispered. "I thought, maybe if I offered what they wanted, you wouldn't leave." Ray swallowed hard, feeling his chest tighten. "You don't have to offer me anything," he said, his voice firmer than before. "I helped you because you needed help. That's it." Velia looked at him again, this time longer. She studied his face like she was trying to find a lie, but there wasn't one. Ray meant it. She lowered her head slowly, and for the first time since they met, her body relaxed a little. Ray stood up and checked the heater again. It was still working, barely. He needed to find more fuel by morning, or they'd both freeze. He unrolled a thermal blanket and handed it to her. "You can rest here," he said. Pointing to the cot, she nodded and lay down slowly, as if afraid the bed would vanish that night. As Ray tried to sleep on the cold metal floor, Velia whispered from the cot, "Do humans feel lonely too?" Ray opened his eyes and stared at the ceiling. "Yeah," he said after a moment. "We do." There was a pause, and then she whispered, "I've been alone for a long time." Ray didn't say anything. He didn't have the right words. Not yet, but he stood up, grabbed another blanket, and placed it gently over her. "I'm here now," he said softly. "You're not alone anymore." She didn't answer, but her breathing grew steadier. Ray sat beside her, his back against the wall. Outside, the storm raged louder, but inside, a strange kind of peace was settling. Ray didn't know what tomorrow would bring. He didn't know how to fix what had been done to her, but he knew one thing for sure. He wasn't leaving her behind. Not now, not ever. The storm didn't stop for 2 more days. The bunker stayed cold and dark, but it became a place of safety. Ray fixed a second heat lamp, using parts from his old gear. He also found a can of emergency tea hidden under the floor panel. It didn't taste good, but it was warm, and warmth was everything now. Velia sat wrapped in blankets near the lamp. She no longer looked like she was dying. Her color was slowly returning, her hands no longer shaking as badly, but her eyes still held the weight of fear. She didn't smile, not even once. But she talked more now, not all at once, but in little pieces. Like broken glass being carefully picked up one by one. "I was trained to obey," she said quietly one night. Her voice barely above a whisper. Ray didn't say anything, just listened. "I was told humans were dangerous," she added. "They said humans break things they love." Ray looked at her across the dim room, his face calm. "I've heard people say that about aliens too," he said, "but I don't believe it." Velia nodded slowly. "I didn't believe it either, until I met you." She touched her collar. Gently, the metal still wrapped around her neck like a memory. Ray had tried to remove it, but the lock was alien tech and dangerous to tamper with. He had promised to remove it once they reached a proper facility. "How long were you alone?" "Before I found you?" Ray asked. She closed her eyes. "I don't know, maybe weeks. No one came." She whispered, "Just wind and cold." Ray moved closer, handed her a warm cloth to clean her hands. "I'm sorry you went through that," he said. Velia stared at the cloth, then took it slowly. "I stopped thinking I was a person," she said. "I was just a number in a file." Ray shook his head. "You're not a number now. You're Velia," he said, "and you're with me." She looked at him for a long time, her expression hard to read. Then she asked softly, "Would you have helped me if I didn't offer you a child?" Ray blinked, surprised by the question. "Yes," he said, without any doubt in his voice. "I didn't help you for that." Velia lowered her gaze, as if ashamed. "I didn't know what else to offer," she said. "That's all they told me I was good for." Ray leaned forward, his eyes serious. "You're worth more than that," he said firmly. "You don't need to offer anything. You don't have to earn care, Velia." She didn't reply, but her hands trembled again. Not from the cold, but from something deeper, something she had held in for too long. Ray gently placed his hand near hers on the floor, not touching, but close enough to feel his warmth. "You're safe here," he said quietly. "You can just be yourself." That night, Velia didn't sleep on the cot alone. She curled up near Ray, not too close, but close enough to feel less empty. The heat lamps flickered above them, casting shadows on the ceiling like moving clouds. Ray didn't sleep much, but he didn't mind. He stayed awake listening to the storm and to Velia's breathing. At one point, her voice broke the silence. "I used to dream of being with someone," she whispered, "not because they needed me, but because they wanted me." Ray turned his head toward her. "I think you still can," he said softly. "I think you will, in the dim morning light," Velia asked, "when the storm ends. Will you leave?" Ray stood up and stretched his arms, then looked at her. "I came alone, but I won't leave that way," he said. "I'll take you with me. If you want to come." Velia's eyes widened just a little. "You'd do that?" Ray nodded. "Of course," he said. "You don't belong here, forgotten in the cold." She pulled the blanket tighter around herself and whispered, "Thank you." It was the first time she said those words to him, and it made Ray's chest feel warm. The storm was dying down, the wind growing quieter outside. Sunlight was beginning to touch the snow-covered ruins. But inside the bunker, something had already changed. Not just the air, not just the temperature. Something human. Velia no longer looked like someone waiting to die. She looked like someone beginning to hope. Asterisk, the snow outside had stopped, but the silence that followed was heavier than the storm. Ray stood near the door of the bunker, scanning the sky with a small signal reader. The screen blinked red. "No signal found." He sighed, his breath turning into mist. They had only one chance, and time was slipping away. Velia sat in the corner, her knees pulled to her chest, wrapped in a blanket. She watched Ray quietly, her glowing blue eyes full of questions. "Is someone coming?" she asked softly. Ray shook his head. "Not yet, but maybe soon, before the storm." Ray had sent a beacon message to his team. It was weak, but it had a chance to reach them in orbit. If they received it, a scout ship would return for him in one day, but only if they saw the emergency flare. And to launch it, Ray had to reach the mountain ridge. 2 kilometers away. "I need to go up there," he said, pointing at the icy hill through the cracked window. "There's an old flare launcher buried in the station. I can fix it and fire the flare, they'll see us." Velia's face tightened with fear. "If you go, will you leave me here?" Ray looked at her, stepped closer, and knelt down. "I'm not leaving you," he said. "You're coming with me." Her hands trembled. "I won't slow you down." Ray smiled gently. "We go together, or not at all." Velia nodded, her lips pressed tight. She wasn't strong yet, but she stood, holding on to the wall. Ray helped her into a thicker coat and wrapped her feet in extra cloth. She leaned on him, her steps shaky but determined. They stepped out into the snow, the sky above them now clear and sharp. The air was cold enough to burn their skin, but the silence made it worse. No wind, no sound, no wind, no sound. Just the crunch of their footsteps on the frozen ground as they moved slowly toward the ridge. Velia spoke in a soft voice. "I never thought I'd leave that bunker alive." Ray glanced at her. "You're not only alive," he said, "you're fighting." She gave him a small look. Like the beginning of a smile, her legs were weak, and more than once she stumbled, each time. Ray caught her before she fell. "I'm sorry," she said, breathing hard. "Don't be," Ray replied. "You're doing great." Halfway up the ridge, they passed through the remains of an old alien outpost. Velia stopped and stared at a rusted symbol on a wall, sharp lines, like a cage. This was one of their stations. She whispered, "They brought us here before we were left behind." Ray touched the wall gently. "So many others like you." "Yes," she said, voice quiet. "Most didn't survive." Ray looked around, and his heart sank. Small bones, a broken collar, and torn blankets were half buried in snow. He said nothing. But his grip on Velia's hand tightened when they finally reached the flare station. The building was half buried in ice. Ray pried open the frozen door and stepped inside with Velia. It was dark, full of broken parts and shattered glass. But the flare gun was still there, frozen in its mount. Ray worked fast, his fingers numb, his breath shaking. He pulled wires, cleaned contacts, and pushed energy from his suit battery into the core. Velia sat nearby, holding a tiny light he gave her, watching his every move. "You know what I wish?" she asked quietly. Ray didn't look up, just said, "What?" "I wish I could stay near you, even when this is over." Ray stopped working and looked at her. "You will," he said simply. "We'll find a place, together." She looked down, blinking quickly. Then she whispered, "If I could give you a child one day, I'd want it to be yours." Ray didn't know what to say. He just nodded, then turned back to the flare. His hands shaking more than before. With a sudden spark, the flare unit lit up green. Ray loaded the last charge and aimed it toward the sky. He looked at Velia, and she gave a small nod. He fired, and the orange flare shot into the air, cutting the blue sky like a fire arrow. They stood together in the cold, watching the light disappear. Now, all they could do was wait. Ray reached over and held her hand. "I won't let them leave without you," he said. Velia closed her eyes and leaned into his shoulder. "Then I'm not afraid anymore," she whispered. Far above them, a ship began to shift in orbit, and the countdown had already begun. The flare had been fired, its light cutting across the sky like a promise. Ray and Velia stood on the ridge, breathing heavy, their bodies cold but hearts full of hope. Somewhere up there, A human ship might have seen it, but they couldn't. Wait here. If the rescue team landed, they'd aim for the lower valley, not the ridge. They had to move fast, and the only way down was through the death zone. Velia looked down the narrow path that twisted between sharp rocks and broken machines. "Are you sure this is the way?" she asked. Ray nodded, checking his scanner. "It's dangerous," he said, "but it's faster." He helped her down the first slope, careful with every step. The snow was thin here, but the ground was full of rusted metal and hidden traps. Old war machines, some still active, had been left in sleep mode after the last battle. Now, even one wrong sound could wake them as they walked. They passed shattered helmets and old human flags buried in frost. Ray felt a chill not from the cold, but from the memory of what happened here. This was where the humans and aliens had last fought, a place where no one had truly won. Velia stayed close to him, her hand gripping his tightly. Her feet hurt, but she didn't complain. Her eyes scanned every shadow, every broken wall. "I used to hear stories about this place," she said quietly. "They said no one who entered ever came out." Ray glanced at her, then said with a half-smile, "Well, let's be the first ones to prove them wrong." They moved in silence, stepping over twisted beams and shattered drones. Suddenly, a sharp sound echoed through the valley, a soft click, followed by a high-pitched whine. Ray froze, pulling Velia down behind a broken shield plate. From the snow ahead, something moved. A tall, insect-like machine unfolded its legs, rising from the ground. Like a ghost, its single red eye blinked. Scanning the area, Ray whispered, "Don't move." Velia held her breath, her body shaking slightly. The machine paused, then turned away, marching slowly into the mist. Only after it was gone did they dare to breathe. Ray exhaled and whispered, "We're lucky." Velia nodded, tears in her eyes. "I thought that was the end." They kept going, slower now, using every bit of cover they could find. But then the wind changed, and behind them, the machine turned back. Its eye flashed red, and it let out a sharp alarm. "It saw us," Ray said, grabbing Velia's hand. "Run!" They sprinted through the valley, jumping over debris, dodging fallen towers. The machine gave chase, metal legs pounding against stone. Ray's lungs burned, but he didn't stop. Velia tripped once, scraping her knee, but Ray pulled her up without missing a step. Ahead, a narrow tunnel opened into the cliff. "If we make it through there." "It can't follow," Ray shouted. The entrance was small, just wide enough for them to slide through. Ray pushed Velia ahead, and she slipped inside. He followed just as the machine fired, sending sparks over his shoulder. Inside the tunnel, they collapsed to the ground, panting. The machine stopped at the entrance. Unable to fit its body inside, it let out a loud, angry noise, then backed away. Its red eye fading, Ray laughed, breathless. "That was close." Velia looked at him, her cheeks red from running. "Why did you come back for me?" she asked suddenly. Ray blinked, surprised by the question. "I told you," he said. "I wasn't going to leave you behind." She looked down, her voice quiet. "But you could have made it out faster alone." Ray shook his head. "Maybe," he said, "but I would have been alone too." That silence returned between them, warm and soft now, not cold like before. Velia leaned against him, her head resting on his shoulder. "Do all humans care like you?" she asked. Ray smiled. "I don't know," he said, "but I do." They rested a little longer, then moved through the tunnel. It opened into a valley where a landing beacon still blinked, just barely working. Ray sent another signal, praying someone out there was listening. The wind was calm now, the sky slowly turning orange with sunset. Velia stood beside him, her arm wrapped around his. "We made it through the death zone," she said softly. Ray looked at her and nodded. "We did." Above them, A sound broke the silence, a distant engine. Growing louder, Ray's eyes lit up and Velya's mouth opened in shock. The rescue ship was coming, and this time they wouldn't be left behind. Asterisk, the sound of the rescue ship grew louder, echoing through the valley like thunder mixed with hope. Ray stood tall, waving his arms toward the sky, his eyes wide with relief. Velya stood beside him, holding onto his coat, her body shaking not from cold this time, but from disbelief. A silver shadow cut through the clouds, dropping lower and lower. The ship was real, human-made, with rescue markings on the side and bright white lights flashing under its wings. Velya gasped, covering her mouth, her eyes wet. She had never seen a ship land just for her. Ray squeezed her hand. "They're here," he said softly. "You're safe now." The ship hovered for a moment, then landed with a soft hum, snow blowing in all directions. The ramp lowered, and two rescue officers in thick suits stepped out. Ray walked forward, slowly raising one hand. "I'm Ray Trent," he shouted over the wind. "I sent the signal." The officers nodded, then stopped when they saw Velya. Their eyes narrowed slightly. One of them instinctively reached toward his belt. Ray noticed it immediately and stepped between them. "She's with me," he said firmly. "She's not a threat." The officers looked at each other, unsure. Velya lowered her eyes, stepping back. She had seen that look before, the look that came before rejection, before being pushed away. "She was left here to die," Ray continued. "She's injured, starving, and unarmed. I don't care what rules you follow," he said. "She comes with us." There was silence, just the wind brushing past. Then the older officer gave a slow nod. "She comes," he said simply. Ray turned to Velya and held out his hand. She hesitated, her lip trembling, then took it together. They walked up the ramp and into the warm light of the ship. Inside, everything felt new, bright and strange. Clean walls, working heaters, soft chairs, and warm air filled the cabin. Velya blinked, her senses overwhelmed. She reached out and touched the wall. Just to make sure it was real, a medic approached with a gentle smile. He scanned her and frowned slightly. "She's in bad shape," he said, "but she'll recover." Then he looked at Ray. "You did a good thing." Velya was taken to the medbay and given a real bed, clean clothes, and something warm to drink. Ray stayed nearby the whole time. He didn't care about debriefings or questions. All he cared about was her. Later that night, Velya sat in bed, a soft blanket over her shoulders. Ray sat beside her, a small tray of food in his lap. She hadn't said much since the ship took off. Now, she looked at him and whispered, "I feel like I'm in someone else's life." Ray chuckled softly. "Maybe that's because the life you deserve is finally starting." She looked down at her hands, no longer covered in dirt or cold. "I'm scared," she said. Ray leaned forward. "Of what?" "That this won't last," she said. "That I'll be taken away again." Ray reached out, gently taking her hand. "I won't let that happen," he said. "You're with me now, and I don't abandon people." She looked into his eyes, searching for doubt, but found none. "You're different," she said softly. "No one's ever treated me like I mattered." Ray smiled. "Well, get used to it. In the morning." A doctor approached Ray with a report. "She's recovering fast," he said. "And something else." Ray raised an eyebrow. "What is it?" "She's still fertile," the doctor said. "The damage wasn't permanent." Ray nodded slowly, then looked at Velya across the room. She was watching the stars from the window. The doctor leaned closer. "Just so you know, she doesn't need to carry a child to have value." Ray smiled. "You don't have to tell me that later." As the ship sailed across the stars, Velya joined Ray by the observation deck. She looked out at the galaxies, her face calm but curious. "This is the first time I've ever seen the stars from above," she said. "They're so big, so beautiful." Ray stood beside her, his hand brushing hers. "This is just the beginning," he said. "We're going somewhere safe now." Velia leaned against him, her head resting on his shoulder. "I don't know what comes next," she whispered. Ray replied, "We'll figure it out together." And in that moment, under the endless sky, she believed him. The ship touched down on Earth in the early morning. A soft breeze moved through the green hills near the landing pad. Ray stepped off first, his boots sinking gently into real soil. He turned and reached up to help Velia down the ramp. She looked nervous, her hand shaking as she took his. The sky above was blue, wide, and full of birds she had never seen before. "It's warm," she said softly, her feet touching the ground like it was something holy. Ray smiled. "Welcome home." For the first few days, they stayed in a safe zone near the base. Doctors checked on Velia daily, making sure her body was healing well. Ray handled the papers, meetings, and questions from the officials. But he made one thing clear: Velia was staying with him. Always, no labs, no interviews, no experiments. She wasn't a specimen, she was a person. Eventually, Ray found a quiet house in the hills, far from the noise of the city. A small cabin with a garden, trees, and a view of the stars at night. He brought her there. And for the first time in her life, Velia had a door she could close. Not a cell, not a cage, but a place where she was safe. Inside, the walls were painted soft colors, and sunlight warmed the wooden floor. Ray cooked simple meals, and they sat together by the window, watching birds land on the fence. Velia had never seen birds before, and she loved how free they looked. "They don't have collars," she whispered once. Watching a red one hop around each day, she grew stronger. She started walking in the garden, planting flowers, even laughing softly when the dirt got on her clothes. Ray gave her space, but he was always nearby. Whenever she looked back, he was there, never too far. Never cold. One evening, as the sun dipped low, Velia sat on the porch, wrapped in a soft shawl. Ray joined her with 2 cups of tea. They sat in silence for a while, watching the sky turn orange. "Do you miss the stars?" he asked gently. Velia shook her head. "Not anymore." She looked around the garden, at the house, and then at him. "This feels bigger than space," she whispered. "This feels like belonging." Ray sipped his tea, his eyes never leaving her face. "You belong here," he said. "With me." Velia leaned her head on his shoulder. "I never imagined a life like this," she said. "No orders, no fear, just peace." Ray smiled. "It's not perfect," he said, "but it's real." The wind brushed against them, soft and warm. Then Velia placed her hand over her stomach. Slowly, gently. Ray noticed, but said nothing at first. She looked up at him, her voice barely above a whisper. I think I carry something now." Ray's heart stopped for a second. "Akoo." He reached for her hand, holding it tight. "Are you sure?" She nodded slowly, her eyes wide but calm. "I feel it," she said. "I don't know how, but I do." Ray didn't speak right away. He just pulled her into a hug, holding her close. He didn't feel fear, only something deep and warm. Sense of meaning. She wasn't offering a child to survive this time. She was carrying life because she felt safe, because she wanted to. "You don't owe me anything," Ray said into her hair. "I know," she whispered. "That's why this matters." Weeks passed, and Velia grew brighter. Her steps lighter, her laughter easier. She painted the nursery room herself, even though she had never held a brush before. Ray fixed the roof, cooked breakfast, and made her laugh with silly stories from Earth. They weren't just surviving anymore. They were living together. One night, under the stars, Velia looked up and whispered, "They used to call me broken." Ray turned to her, taking her hand in his. "To me, you've never been anything but strong," he said, "and now you're whole." She smiled a real smile, the kind that showed in her eyes. And in that quiet place, with wind in the trees and warmth between them, the past no longer mattered. Only the future, and the family they were building, one quiet, beautiful day at a time.